Hey, welcome back to the food forest. We're going to go on a tour today. Everyone loves having repeated, often tours. So we are starting this one actually down in the Old Man Walking Trail. So this is the Old Man Walking Trail. And I'll show you a bit of a update on what this looked like, maybe even just a year or two ago. So these leaves were basically just dumped out from leaf bags. I put the leaf bag itself down first, and then I just dumped the leaf bags on top of that. So I want to show you what the soil is like 2 years later. So this one used to be all grass, and the grass is just completely gone, and everything else is just nice soil. Super soft. And we can plant our raspberries. Anytime I dig in my garden, I always get garlic as well. So that's it. Just really, really nice soil. Just pull back. You get all this nice leaf litter. And just like, look at that. This used to be grass. And this is how you kind of reset an area so that you can plant in it. So what used to be grass is going to slowly become the forest. You can see that we let mullein grow, and the reward for that is that we've now got mullein going to seed. So mullein is a great medicinal plant. It's a biennial, so this is the second year. It was little rosettes last year, just stayed nice and low to the ground, and this year we get the big flower stalk. So really, really cool looking plant. A lot of people think that this is a weed, and you know, a weed is just a unwanted plant. But you can see it's filling in quite well with half stuff I planted, half stuff that nature wants to put in. And then this is continuation of the walking trail. I'm underneath these apple trees. So we've got lots of apple set. Tons of apples this year. And we've actually got pawpaws. So let's go to the pawpaws. So yes, for anyone who's new, we can grow pawpaws here in Canada's Zone 5 or so. Oh, look at this. We've got friends. Come on, see if we can focus on them. And then the pawpaws, this one's got some down there. Can you see them? Right there. So we've got a couple there. This one's got another set of them somewhere. And the fun thing about this year is we're going to be able to try a couple different varieties of pawpaw, actually. Oh, there it is. It's way up here. So they're actually swelling this year. The plant dropped a bunch of them, but they're actually swelling. We've got Jerusalem artichokes all around the pawpaw because deer love Jerusalem artichokes. So this is in a very wild area for us. That way when deer come in here, they've got their favorite plant that they love to munch on, and they leave these alone for the most part. So we try to do that wherever possible. Give them their favorite food, and they'll eat those down, and then they'll leave our actual pawpaws alone. So here's a different variety of pawpaw. We've got some growing. This one had quite a bit, actually. We've got some more here. And this is what you'll typically see. Well, we've got a little bit more here. This is what you'll typically see, or what we were typically seeing. Do you see that little set there? So they set fruit, and then they started to get a little bigger, and then they just kind of dried and fell off. That will either be if the plant is not ready for fruit, and it'll just seal those off and it'll drop them. It could also possibly be if they weren't pollinated. So that'll be just the flower female organs. The ovary, basically, it'd be the ovary of the flower that just gets shut off, sealed off, and then dropped. So this one's got some somewhere. I can't remember where this one was, but we've got a couple. So we've got a couple on each of these 3 trees. And then this is the rest of the Old Man Walking Trail here. You can see obviously the raspberries have done really well. Got asparagus. So we're kind of trying to get some wild stuff that I know grows well in the wild. We're growing out here. And then we've got lots of stuff that a lot of people consider weeds, but are actually very, very valuable for the bees growing in here as well. And then I try to pick out our local native, or sorry, non-native invasives, like the dog strangling vine, and stuff like garlic mustard. I'll try to pull that stuff out, but that's really the only stuff I pull out. If something is something, you know, a plant that someone calls a weed, I don't really pull it out unless it has 0 ecological benefit and it displaces other things. And we've got, I believe this is a cherry, sour cherry. So we've got lots of cherries down in here as well. And this is, I believe this is a pecan, a northern pecan. Okay, so turning, this Old Man Walking Trail winds and snakes, but it's kind of more of the same thing. So what I'm going to do is hop across, and we'll hop up to the pool, or the pond, sorry. It's the best kind of pool, the one that doesn't have any chemicals in it and benefits nature. So we kind of cut a little bit of a path up here. And actually before we get to that, or actually just after, I'll show you some of the paths that I've been cutting through here. So you can see I don't really do anything down here. I should probably come and clean out this lower waterfall area. This is where everything builds up. This is where any of the debris in the pond collects. And this is a big tank. And underneath it, this is just rocks on the surface. Underneath it is the reservoir for the pumps. So as the water falls down, any debris gets left on the surface. So I do have to make sure that I'm cleaning that off. And this is one of the things that keeps the pond looking fantastic, because all the debris gets skimmed and pulled here. You can see, look at the sea buckthorn up top, just like reaching for the sky. We've got a peach and an elderberry there. We transplanted an elderberry here into the crook, and then we've got more elderberries kind of on the side. And you can see that the black-eyed Susans are coming in. The rudbeckia is starting to come in. And I've started to clear out little walking pathways because we've had guests coming, so I want to get it to where it's not a wild, crazy mess. People can actually get around. And that also found me a service berry that I'd planted that kind of got swallowed up. So I do want to give those plants a chance to get up and over all of this crazy mess. It did mean I had to cut out a little bit of oregano, which we harvested in our drying. You know, various daisies were cut just and laid down just so that I can get through these pathways a bit. We've got St. John's wort in flower here. It's a very valuable medicinal plant. So lots of valuable stuff all throughout here. And the service berries here are pretty much done. I see this thing moving all the time, the whole plant just like going like this, and then that's a bird sitting in there trying to rip off all the service berries. So that's been really fun to watch. There's a couple left for the birds, and I'll leave those for the birds for sure. We've got daylilies that are popping up. You can eat these. They're like little spicy pods. And then got some here actually in flower, and you can actually eat the whole flower as well, which may not sound appetizing to people, but it actually is surprisingly appetizing. Really good in salads. I put it in burritos, mix it with my eggs. It's actually very nice. And just the fact that you have flowers that is food growing on your land is really, really cool. So here's the area that I've been working on. I did the sumac video. Here's the plum. And I'll show you what this plum looked like maybe 3 years ago, 2 years ago. Got some pawpaws in here, so pawpaw there, here, and maybe somewhere at the top. Those will kind of, I think, look really nice.
A nice tropical look for a cold hardy pond. That should look really nice. And then just small grading changes. Added a bunch of wetland stuff in. We've got, I found an old stump that had kind of cracked off, so then I found this here that kind of fit perfectly. So I figured it kind of looks like this was, you know, there and cracked off and fell. I'll put some mosses on top of that. We put in a plum here. This was kind of all just graded out downhill. I'm really afraid of erosion, so I put in some steppers. I've did a lot of work on angling each of these steps back into the hill and then downhill slightly into a swale. So now then I'll connect this into this swale here and you know, build this out over time. And that way you can kind of come down here, you can keep going down to the bottom, you can go down the swale if you want to go through the cedar forest. And then you can see the growth on this thing. This thing's grown really, really well. This here is the walking trail that I cut through the sumacs. So this is kind of on contour. Your walking trail should always be on contour if you can. And then what we can do in the fall is we can dig out some of this path here, put it on the downhill side, even it out, and then also put a little berm in. That'll kind of hold a little bit of water, and then we can put nursery beds here on the bottom, and we can use this as a propagating space that has kind of nice soft dappled sun. And then we're combining that with a harvest of the sumacs. I'll show you what we did with that later on in this video. So we just jammed in all of the sumacs here. This comes right up into the lower part of this swale. So this is this swale here with my linden tree there. Name slipped my mind for a sec. Linden tree, blackberries, asparagus, and then we've got a kind of like a pear guild set up on the swale here. You can see I've started to fold over the comfrey so that it acts as a rhizome barrier, and then new comfrey will pop up. So this is what the comfrey will do. New comfrey is going to pop up. So you get 2 flushes of comfrey that way. This will act as a grass suppressor, weed suppressor. In the meantime, once this gets up and we'll shade out grasses creeping in, I can actually harvest this. I can make comfrey tea with it as a fertilizer, a liquid fertilizer amendment for my plants. Basically dead soils. So we excavated for the pond. Look, the kids are swimming. It's like 8 o'clock at night. They can't get enough. So we excavated for the pond and built the hill out, and the soil that we used was basically just dead sand from under the topsoil, like feet and feet and feet under the topsoil. No life in it at all. So we're going to use a nutrient boost with a microbiological kick to it, and that's the comfrey tea. It's got to be aerobic because we want that healthy, beneficial bacteria in our soils. Go Diego, go! Okay, now we're going to start just dropping some of that comfrey down. One thing I did think about these pawpaws actually is that pawpaw is an understory tree. It'll fruit at the edge of a forest, but it really wants to be in shade, and on this hill it's like full sun. So there's a chance that these things really burn up in the next couple days. I'm going to really watch them. And I can always kind of prop some of these up and kind of give them a little bit of shade. Maybe I'll put a chicken wire fence around them and kind of prop up and give them some dappled shade. They'll do just fine like that. Maybe give them a little bit of time outside of the sun. So just another thing that I might think of doing. So if you see wire cages around some of these plants, that's what I'm thinking. These are going to be great here in a little while, but for now, it might be a little too much sun. That one's looking like it's doing really well. A little bit of yellowing of leaves, which is understandable. There's no nutrients in the soil. That could be a nutrient deficiency, a small one.
And here's that same spot today. So here's the same pawpaw trees and what it looks like today. Right at this one here, we actually had some soapwort. I can actually see some of it here. Oh, do you see that snake? Little garden friends. So we actually had some soapwort here that was growing up all through the tree. So we actually harvested it, just chopped it and dropped it and put it down. Yeah, that's the thing about nature, is if you build it, nature will come. We actually love snakes here. We don't have any venomous snakes, so that's good, and they take care of any kind of mole and vole problems, so snakes are good. And they also kind of keep the frog population in check, which is kind of sad. I love the froggos, but it is good to have something that, you know, keeps their population in check. Or I can just compost it, or I can just leave it there and it'll actually just decompose. I always show my main food forest strip. What I'm actually going to do is bypass that now, because I find some of these other areas of my property don't get shown as much because I'm always showing the same stuff. We've got raspberries coming now, so just starting. Always give them a little tug. If they don't want to just freely come off, they're not ready yet. So I'm out here checking every day, seeing if they're ready. And then we've got the rest. So we were down on that part. Now we're going to walk across on this part. This is another swale here. This is actually a formal swale. This one is about 3 or 4 feet deep and about 5 feet wide. And then all the soil built up here, and then we planted in, for example, this apple tree. So I believe this is a northern spy. Actually, this one is a Spartan. So this is a Spartan apple. And we've got our pond here. I use this pond to propagate water hyacinth. You can see it in there. And then I use that as a ground cover in the other pond. And a way to test, kind of like canary in a coal mine, what water pH is doing better. This one's not connected to any limestone. Got spider web in the face. So this one's not connected to any limestone. So the water is also not aerated, it's just stagnant, but we do have frogs and stuff living in there to eat mosquitoes. So we don't actually get too bad mosquitoes there because of that. But I can check the water quality, and then I can compare it to how the pond is doing in transitioning off the limestone and getting into homeostasis with a nice pH in the pond. So I'll show you, maybe just quickly before we go, look at the health of this water hyacinth. Okay, just for comparison, we'll show you right now the other one. And then this is the water hyacinth in the pond. And the pond pH is around 8.5, 8.8. So it's, you know, 15-ish times more alkaline than rainwater. So we're still dealing with transitioning the water pH from the limestone. It's leaching into the water a bit, I believe, causing a bit of an elevated pH. This is why it's hard to keep plants alive in the edge of the pond. But the more I read about it, if the frog and the fish population is healthy, which it is, then I shouldn't really necessarily worry too much about that, and just find things that do want to grow, and over time then you know, it'll balance itself out. So we've got some marsh marigold and irises that do well, so we'll just kind of stick with those things for now. Try to get some pond plants growing in the phototropic layer of the pond so that we can get some fish nesting sites, you know, fish spawning areas. And we do have some water lotus that is growing, and we've got a little bit of lilies that are struggling but are growing. So that's just basically the struggles with the pond right now. It's just a pH issue, but the fish are super happy and healthy, and especially the frogs. The frogs do really well in here. So if they're all happy, frogs are very sensitive, so if frogs are doing really well in here, then that's a good sign at least. just for comparison. We'll show you right now the other one. Right on the edge here, we've got a pawpaw. This swale now comes up, and the elevation of the swale rises. This forms a lip. So this is the same height as the berm, and then it goes down with the trench. So what this means is this is actually the lowest part of my swale. It's a little bit lower than the berm. And that means that if it ever fills up all the way, it'll overflow here. And then it'll overflow down this rocked out path. It looks like wood chips, but you can see here, it's actually rocks. I've rocked this all in so the water can kind of drain down as much as possible. And where it flows, it's actually not going to erode away soil. It's actually just going to drain down into the pond. And then the pond will act as an emergency reservoir for that overflow event. So we kind of design into our swales all of this kind of thinking. And then where this overflows is way down there. That swims all the way down the river area that we were just at, ending in that reservoir at the bottom that we were just at. And then when that overflows, it heads down into the Old Man Walking Trail in a very slow, controlled way. So that way we're minimizing the erosion on our land, even in a flood event. One plant that I've really enjoyed, just look at this. This is butterfly milkweed. So it doesn't really look like a typical milkweed, but this is butterfly milkweed, and it's always covered in insects. And it's one of the reasons why we have, I'm not sure if it is the reason why we have monarchs, because we do have traditional wild milkweed as well. But I'm sure it's helping somehow. Here's the main food forest strip. So we're actually going to bypass this whole section. It's not really doing anything new than the last videos. I mean, we've got lots of black currants that are coming in. So we've been eating these. Feeding those to the dogs. You can see the red currants are coming in now. So that's what's growing. Now we've got lots of strawberries coming in. You can see we've got raspberries here. Let's just go pick some of those. A couple of these look ready. We've been harvesting rose hips. We got lots of roses here. And we got some raspberries coming in. So everything here is functional. This one actually is perfect. So we are in prime raspberry season, just entering into it. And I have to say, of all the plants that I planted, I didn't think I'd like raspberries that much because I didn't really like them in the store. But they are so different in a food forest, fresh off the plant. They're so different than the store ones. So yeah, we've got some raspberries there. Looks like we've got a Aquascape here that the birds didn't finish off. Got a couple of them. That's a little small, tasty treat. Okay, so let's head down to the pond. And I'll show you this pond area from a couple years ago. So this is kind of the entrance in. Actually, I'll wait here. We'll show what it looked like a couple years ago first. I'm a bit of a scatterbrain. I try to design and think and think and think and then act, but I do tend to just kind of plant things here and there. So I have kind of 3 food systems emerging, and I have a centrally located lower area at the side of the house, and I thought this would be a perfect place to put in a water source. So if anyone's ever looked up eco ponds or natural ponds or recreational ponds, that's kind of what I'm thinking at this this area here at the side of the house. Okay, so welcome back to the present. Here's the pond area now. It's a little different. This area's changed just a bit. Oh, and I'll show you right here next to us. We've got cold hardy kiwi that's growing right up the side of the house. And I'll show you all these ugly little, my backup propane and stuff. I think it's, speaking of the propane, I think it's a good idea as a prep, as a general preparedness thing, to have backup propane tanks. A lot of people just have one tank, and I don't really know why. They're so cheap.
and you have to rotate them through anyway, and they last for a very long time. You should always have more than one tank. We actually have about 8 tanks of propane. That way, if power ever did go out, we would be able to boil water, because we would want to boil the pond water before we drank it. So we'd be able to boil water and deal with that pathogen issues, and we'd have access to water. This is a cherry olive here. We kind of cleaned this bed out. So this is a cherry olive. This is more related to an olive than it is to a cherry. And then we've got more roses here. We had a whole bunch of dog strangling vine that crept into this. This is our hot tub, which we have just laid up, and I wanted to turn into a raised garden bed. But we're not really hot tub people, so I'm showing you my disgusting hot tub. If anyone wants that, you're free to have it. If you're gonna do something good with it and not you know, we're not really hot tub people. We don't go in there. I don't really want any kind of chemicals on my body, so. We've got persimmons here growing. Got my sorrel that I'm just letting go to seed. And this is a garden area that we used last year, but it doesn't have great sun, so we've actually transitioned away from it. And I planted in like some lamb's quarters. I just sowed some seed in. So I'm getting some kind of yield off of that, but for the most part, we're not really using this anymore. I'll probably transition this into something different. And then we've got the swale with the bees back in there. I normally walk, we'll walk back here. This is fun. So this is a second swale. There's actually 2. This one was built up. We didn't dig. We just built straight up off of the ground for this one, piling things on contour. And you can see it does such a good job at holding moisture. Like, look at the growth of these Jerusalem artichokes. They just suck up moisture. Then we've got another one here. There's actually a swale cut in down there, and then soil planted on the other side of it. So it stops it right at the last fruit tree. That way we're holding any kind of moisture in the ground right. So the last fruit trees, this is a cherry, and we've got hazelnuts there, so those can suck it up before it goes down. The old man walking trail is kind of there, so anything that comes down here is really not being used by my food forest anymore. That's why we tried to stop and hold it. You can see actually I'm standing right next to the other patch of milkweed that we have. I think this is probably where the monarchs are coming from. And actually sometimes I find if I give them a gentle shake so I don't knock off any young monarchs, we actually get monarchs jumping out of here. And you can see I've put them everywhere. It grows up and it's a little overgrown with grass, but I've been sowing in some wildflowers. Yeah, the grass is kind of creeping in. I don't manage this whatsoever, but I could probably come in and try to remove some of the plants that I don't want to allow some of the plants that I do want to grow. So we're eating a couple cherries off of this cherry here. This one is the Montmorency cherry. It's a sour cherry, and it's doing pretty good. There's kind of one there that's a little bit ready, but I think I'll leave them for a bit. If the birds get them, then that's the price that I pay for having free security, eating all my pests. They can have that, and then they'll stop eating my raspberries that are in bloom right now. So for example, if you got some little birds here checking out all the trees and checking me out. For example, if I went and pulled all those cherries off, I don't really care that much about having the sour cherries. But if I did that, I'm just promoting the birds to get the other plants that maybe I do want a little bit more. So here's the back side of that swale. Sorry for doing a full spin around there. Hope that didn't make anyone feel nauseous. This is the bees. It's a lot of bees. We're going to reduce the number of bees that we have on the property. But I've been watching for signs of wild pollinators and like wild bees, and they've been doing well. I've also heard it, I hear sometimes that honeybees will displace wild pollinators, but I've also read studies that are like, they're adamant against that does not happen at all. So I'm not 100% sold on if that's actually a concern or not. Have to definitely look more, because like anything in gardening, or climate science is a great example of this. You can find anything that you want to find on those topics. If you have a preconceived bias and you don't go and read all the studies and compare for yourself and look at meta studies, especially, which look at all the studies and look through conclusions. If you don't look at the meta studies especially, then you can find whatever you want. So you can confirm any bias that you want, both, you know, on the pro side and the negative side. So it's really important to look at the meta analysis. Here's the chickens, the back side of the chickens here. So they're just waking up. Good morning, girls. You can see that we've got the kiwi and everything on the back guild. I didn't really talk about that. We've got cranberries creeping out here. We've got tons of raspberries for them to eat. We've got black walnut here. That's going to be the trellis for the kiwis in the future. And it's getting up nice. And then we've got this trellis that's covered in grapes. Yesterday it was so hot outside. But in here, underneath the grapes where the girls are, it was noticeably cooler, like 20 degrees cooler. And I did a video on lethal critical wet bulb temperature. And a lot of people said, do the things that we do for permaculture help with that? And absolutely they do. Because if it's 100% humidity out there, it's probably going to be 100% humidity in your little food forest guilds. But the shade causes a very drastic cooling. So when you see the weather report and it says that it's, you know, 100 Fahrenheit, 110 Fahrenheit, 120 Fahrenheit where you are, that's just the average temperature wherever the measurements are taken. But your actual temperatures could be well 20 degrees Fahrenheit, 10 degrees Celsius cooler than that in your food forest. So people often said, you know, like some comments said, oh yeah, well, how did ancient peoples survive these events if they didn't have air conditioners? Well, that's the answer. They had forests. They had intact ecosystems to go and live in and hide into. That's how they survived it. They didn't destroy their planet. And temperatures were lower for, you know, most of human history. The last roughly 2 million years or so, temperatures were a little bit lower than they are now. Here is where the sumacs went. So these are the annual gardens. You can see that I haven't quite finished. We're going to add a little bit more here. And we've got some peas growing up that we're starting to climb and grow on some of the squash and stuff. Got garlic mustard coming in there. So I wanted to get them up off of that. I want to get them vertical. And I don't want these things dragging down and killing my crops. So we just jammed in all of the sumacs here. Here's the kale. Still, like, you know, what are we? Almost in, actually we are in July. You know, happy Canada Day, happy July 4th coming up for people, and July 1st for us Canadians. So yeah, we've got really healthy, thick, firm, juicy kale still. It's starting to go to seed, so it has a little bit of a sour brassica flavor, but let's see, let's try it. Actually, not at all yet. It's very good. Oh, maybe a little on the aftertaste, a little. It's starting to bitter up a bit. But we wove in, just to firm things off, we wove in some horizontal sticks, sticking them through the wood. And then this gives more places for this this sugar snap peas. Did I say beans before? Maybe. These are sugar snap peas to hold on to. Got our peppers here. And same thing, we're trying to get the peas up off of the peppers. So this is where the sumac went. One thing to know about sumac is it will root into this, especially the more greener stuff. This is fairly green. This had flowers on it at the top. You know, this one, you can tell it's got these hairs, right? It's got these hairs on it still. This will absolutely root into this bed. So this is something that is just temporary. And we're not going to leave this in here at the end of the season. We're going to take it out, and we'll probably do the same thing next year, because if we don't, this whole bed is going to start popping up sumacs, and it's going to become a sumac bed. So we don't want to do that. We don't want to be ripping sumacs out of the bed, disturbing the soil and the roots of the plants mid-season. So we're going to be doing that. We've got some peppers coming. I know a lot of you are like way ahead of me in terms of weather, so it's kind of looking back like probably even 2 months for some of you. We've got some zucchini, so we got some yellow zucchini
some summer squash. We've got some green zucchini. So zucchini will have male and female flowers on the same plant. Oops, that wasn't good. And you're hoping that you have a mix of male and female flowers on the plants. This is why it's usually good to have a couple zucchini plants. If these just and it's, you know, 50-50. So if these just happen to be a whole bunch of male plants, I won't get any zucchini. So if you ever have a zucchini plant and you're growing a plant but you're not growing any zucchini, it could be a pollination problem, but it's probably just a statistical problem. It's just a bad luck that you only had a certain type, a certain sex of flower that happened to show up. So that's why it's usually good to have a couple, because you'll have a decently high chance of getting, you know, the sexes. A male and a female plant. Got some carrots here. I'll have to probably thin these out. You can see that I let this terrible, awful weed grow in all my beds. Probably my favorite salad green. That is lamb's quarters. And did you know that this has more protein than fish? That has more protein than fish per weight. So if you're eating the same amount of lamb's quarter, you're actually eating more protein than you are if you eat that much weight in fish. This is prickly lettuce. I'm going to clean this out. I keep saying I'm going to, but we eat this when it's young, and I don't want it going to seed necessarily. So now I'll use this as biomatter. So I'll chop it and we'll compost it, or just drop it down and we'll start using it as biomatter. And we got strawberries on the edge here. We're always growing clover for the bees anywhere that we can. So it's growing here. I'm going to wait till that goes to seed and try to spread more of it. We've got the kale going to seed here, and it's not quite ready. I can't really see, but yeah, it's not quite ready. They're still a little soft. And then this is the rest of the annual bed. We'll end our tour here. So we've got, you know, annual bed, but we've got cherries and we've got elderberries growing back in there, and raspberries. So anywhere that we used to have raspberries in our beds, we pulled them out to make an annual bed here, but the raspberries, you can never gonna get all the raspberries. So they keep coming back. They kind of drive my wife a little nuts. But if you don't have anything to plant there, it can be okay to kind of let them grow. You can harvest them, you can sell them, the actual plants, you can dig them up and sell them in the fall and in the spring. But at the same time, if you don't have something there, then you're going to get weeds growing. So anywhere that wants to fill in, I let fill in, because that's how you avoid getting weeds. So for example, she doesn't like this, and she doesn't like this. Well, this is fennel, so this is useful. It's a really good plant. She doesn't like the jewelweed, but that is a really good medicinal plant. And we used to have it down by our river, but that area is kind of covered in poison ivy. So I like having access to it here, so that if I do get a bee sting, or if I get poison ivy especially, I can actually grab some jewelweed and squish it up and rub it on the poison ivy. It takes the itch away. So isn't that funny that it grows right where my poison ivy patch is, and the medicine grows right next to it? That's kind of funny. We do have burdock there, which I will harvest. Actually, let's just get rid of that now. I don't want burdock growing in here. This is an edible, so I could kind of grow it. So I'll crack it here. I don't want to yank it, but I'll just kind of kill it. But I don't want the burrs. I don't want the dogs to come in here and get burrs. And then I can come back in the maybe in about 3 months or so, and we can actually harvest some of the root of the burdock, because it's handy. See, the tomatoes aren't really having a good year. There's not a lot of sun lately. It's been really, really cool. So the tomatoes are just kind of chilling, not really doing much. Kind of was hoping that they would do better and get up over top of this mint, this lemon balm here. And we've got good King Henry going to seed in here. So this is good. So soon we're going to harvest this and spread it. Worst case, it'll kind of grow in here, and that's fine with me. And then we've got grapes that I have to get a better trellis for. but we're actually going to get some grapes. So I wanted to see how good these grapes are before I formally trellis it out. We have it running along the back there for now to use this, because nothing really wants to grow right at the cedars. I think there's like an allelopathy that's going on there. And then we've been also harvesting some scapes. So the garlics are coming in and we got some scapes there. So just kind of hiding stuff everywhere. It looks like wild craziness, but when you know what's in there, it's really not wild and crazy. You know, everything's useful. Everything that I have in here is something that I use, I love, and I want here. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this tour. 30 minutes, it's longer than I thought it would be. Yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.